European governments sought to legitimize the authority of the monarch through the idea of divine right of monarchy. They also built impressive structures, such as the Palace of Versailles in France, to demonstrate their power and glory. Governments in other parts of the world followed similar patterns to consolidate and legitimize their authority. When Peter the Great seized lands on the Baltic Sea from Sweden, the conquest gave Russia its own warm water port on the Baltic, St. Petersburg. Peter moved the Russian capital from Moscow to St. Petersburg so he could keep watch on the boyars there, who were doing their required state service by working in his government. The new city became a testament to Peter's determination to have his own capital. Architects laid out streets in a rectangular grid, unlike the irregular pattern of Moscow and other cities. Peasants and Swedish prisoners of war were forced to work, draining marshes and building streets and government structures. In the mid-18th century, workers built the famous Winter Palace. It was designed in a European rather than a Byzantine style to show Peter's admiration of Europe and its rulers. St. Petersburg was built right off the Baltic Sea so that Russia could have a warm port during the winter, although it could still be cold. This was one of his many plans to modernize, and as you can see, the church is built right here in St. Petersburg off the water. Gorgeous architecture for their churches. Here's the Winter Palace right here. This is funny. This is quite a funny story. He decided that Peter the Great decided that all of his boyars should have clean skin, no facial hair, shaved, which went against a long tradition of having one of those full like Santa beards. And so it got so bad that he had to threaten like the death penalty if you didn't shave your beard. And at one point he just began to shave them himself. And so this is a painting of him shaving his boyar's hair. Askia Muhammad I, or Askia the Great, came to power in 1493. He claimed his predecessor, Sunni Ali, was not a faithful Muslim. Like Mansa Musa of Male, Askia the Great promoted Islam throughout his kingdom and made an elaborate pilgrimage to Mecca. Under his leadership, the Songhai became the largest kingdom in its day in West Africa. Askia made Islam Songhai's official religion in an attempt to unite his empire. In addition to legitimizing his rule through promoting Islam, he also supported an efficient bureaucracy to bring the empire together. Mughal India produced a number of magnificent agricultural accomplishments, including the Taj Mahal, built by Shah Jahan as a tomb for his beloved wife. Mughal rulers also beautified Delhi and had forts built. The craftspeople and builders of Mughal India combined the arts of Islam like calligraphy, illumination of manuscripts, and ceramics with local arts to create magnificent, airy structures with decorative geometric designs. All these accomplishments showed the power of the rulers. Delhi became the new Mughal capital, and much building was done during this period. And we see two pictures, of course, one right here and one right here, the building political. This one's got the romantic story attached to it. This was built by a Shah for his wife who died after having her 14th child, probably from exhaustion. But anyways, he built the Taj Mahal, so it is part museum, part mausoleum, which he was later buried in to be next to the woman he loved. It bears mentioning that she was one of many wives, but I guess she was the one he loved the most. Tremendous changes in government and religion took place in Ottoman territory. However, the arts, the culture, and the economy showed continuities, though they now legitimized the rule of the Ottomans. Constantinople, renamed Istanbul, remained the western end of the overland Silk Roads, and the Grand Bazaar there continued to be full of foreign imports. Coffee houses, although banned by Islamic law, continued to do thriving business throughout the towns of the empire. Istanbul grew more beautiful and expanded across both the straits of the Bosphorus. One famous landmark is the royal residence of the Sultan's Topkapi Palace. Mohammed II began construction on this landmark. Suleiman I ordered many mosques, forts, and other great buildings constructed in the cities under his control. For example, he ordered the construction in Istanbul of the magnificent Suleiman Mosque. This is the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. What's interesting about this is the dome right here. Actually, at the same time, Michelangelo was working on the dome in Rome and having a really hard time with it. There was actually thought to be a competition between the two architects as they're building their dome at the very same time. Here you can see the inside of this dome. The key was to try to build a dome without noticing any work. Like it has to look like it's freestanding. And so both of them, this is like an architectural genius at this time. And so that's why this is such a beautiful place. It's also really lights up in blue. Istanbul remained a center of arts and learning. Poets and scholars from across Asia met in coffee houses and gardens. They discussed works by Aristotle and other Greek writers, as well as the works of many Arabic scholars. Cultural contributions of the Ottomans included the restoration of some of the most glorious buildings of Constantinople, most notably the Cathedral of St. Sophia, which the Ottomans turned into a grand mosque. From the time of Mohammed II, who established a workshop for their production, Ottoman miniature paintings and illuminated manuscripts became famous. The spacious and elegant palace at Versailles became a political instrument. Louis XIV entertained the nobles there and kept them from conducting business elsewhere, such as creating rebellion in their home provinces. Louis XIV's grand buildings at Versailles helped legitimize his power. The palace at Versailles, for example, could accommodate hundreds of guests. During the rule of Louis XIV, some 1,000 employees worked in the palace or on the grounds. Louis XIV built Versailles really to get away from the palace politics that was taking place in Paris from his own mother, who tried to kind of take over the throne. And so he went to Versailles, which was a small hunting palace, and then just began to build it. And over time, what he did was he required all of his noblemen to live there. That way, first of all, it was expensive and they had to pay to live there, so he kind of kept them broke. And the other thing was they couldn't go home and try to rebel against him or try to have more power. So he centralized politics all at Versailles, and then he made them compete for just special positions within his government. One of them was even like, for instance, taking care of the royal bedchamber, which meant you had to wipe the king after he went to the bathroom because he couldn't wipe himself. So he turned the nobility into virtual servants to control them. As in other matters of building and maintaining empires, different methods of raising money worked or fell short in different empires. In all of the world's empires, raising money to fund the goals of imperial expansion and extend state power was a key endeavor. Peter the Great established new industries owned by the state, especially shipyards in St. Petersburg and iron mines in the Ural Mountains. He also encouraged private industries such as metallurgy, woodwork, gunpowder, leather, paper, and mining. He brought in Western European naval engineers to build ships according to Western models. When industrialization failed to bring in the revenue Peter needed for his military ventures, he raised taxes and began to compel workers to work in the shipyards, a sort of urban extension of serfdom. In 1718, the tax on land in Russia was replaced by a tax on heads, or individuals, and peasants became more oppressed than ever. To finance an economy backed by a powerful military, the Ottomans leveled taxes on the peasants and used tax farming to collect it. The tax farmers, local officials, and private tax collectors were distant from the central government. As a result, local officials grew wealthy and corrupt from skimming money from the taxes in their areas, as some of the zamindars did in the Mughal Empire. Agricultural villages continued to be burdened with the upkeep of officers and troops. This burden of taxes and the military would eventually contribute to the economic decline of the empire. In Ming China, as well as in the Ottoman Empire, tax collection was the responsibility of private citizens, in this case wealthy families, each seeing to the collection of land taxes in their area of the countryside. Land taxes made up the bulk of the taxes collected, and the rates tended to be low. Taxes were collected in the form of grains and later silver. Some grains were stored in a local facility. Others were sent on the Grand Canal to military locations. The state also collected taxes on salt, wine, and other goods. For many years, the vault stored a surplus of grains. However, after about 1580, wars, extravagant imperial spending, and the repression of rebellions left the dynasty in bankruptcy. Empires, including China, also collected tributes from other states as a way to demand recognition of their power and authority. Typically, as a form of wealth, tributes were given also as a sign of respect, submission, or allegiance. For example, Korea was a tributary state for China. The Mexica had an extensive tributary arrangements from the people they conquered, although most Aztec citizens, merchants, and artisans paid taxes. An Aztec official was stationed in each capital to collect tributes from local officials. The Songhai Empire also had tributary states. Askia the Great assigned governors and officials to preside over tributary states in the Niger Valley. As long as officials obeyed Songhai policies, they could rule their districts. One way historians contextualize is by examining what came before and what came after an event or development within a culture. Contextualization is also useful across cultures. To contextualize a specific development across cultures, you ask in what other cultures were there similar developments? In what ways were these developments similar to the specific development in the culture under study? In what ways were those developments different from the specific development in the culture under study? For instance, we can look at Ottomans and their practice of slavery. We already know, or will see soon enough, that it could be very harsh in the Americas and in China and certainly in Africa. But yet the Ottomans practiced a different form of slavery. They got their slaves from tributes from conquered people. The slaves were then educated and trained for administration and military service and paid a salary. They became influential members of society and the first standing army in history. And so as a result, we see that that completely differs than, for instance, a slave that might experience the Caribbean in the Americas, which was terrifying and terrible.